Good evening, everyone. People from the Silicon Valley here in person, and those of you from the rest of the US and from India who have joined us on the Zoom. A hearty welcome to you from Hindus for Human Rights. We are launching this series called Desh-Videsh Conversations, difficult conversations across the divide. As you will all agree, the community, particularly the Indian American community, is really is quite split on political issues. And with COVID and the last 3-4 years, we've had very few face-to-face conversations with people who have different opinions than ours. So our hope is to start generating a discussion with people who have different views on various topics. And today is the first of a series. This will be a monthly series on the third Saturday of each month, bringing different topics and different panelists, both from India and from the US. So again, that is Desh-Videsh series. Hope you pencil in the third Saturday of each month to join us. Today's topic is the UAPA law and the political prisoners or prisoners of conscience that it has generated in India, which is of great concern to a lot of people in India as well as here. And we have a stellar panel, and I'm pleased to introduce Govind Acharya of Amnesty International, who will navigate us through the talk today. He will be the moderator, and he will also moderate the Q&A session. Thanks, everyone. And we have something special for the people here after the end of the session. After 1.5 hours, I suppose, we will have a cake cutting ceremony for celebrating India's Republic Day, which is coming very soon. So for those of you here in the room, please stay with us and continue the chit chat over a cake. Thank you. Go in.
Thank you. And oh, that's a big surprise getting that cake at the end. So I am going to, my name is Govind Acharya. I'm with Amnesty International USA. I'm the India country specialist. And I'm going to sort of facilitate here, but I'm going to talk very briefly about the UAPA and then let others have most of the time. Let's go ahead and start talking about the UAPA. It's called the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, known by the acronym UAPA, and I'm giving this very brief introduction so for people who don't know. The context is that it's touted as an anti-terrorism law that was originally enacted. Was there an issue?
Yeah, no,
okay.
You're not showing up there.
I'm not showing up there, but that's. I think it's a speaker's view. I think maybe. Yep, do. It was originally enacted in 1967 to expand Indian authorities' powers to address individuals that were suspected of being a threat to national or even economic security. Despite its supposed justified intent, the controversial law, and this was before 2019, I should say, gave the federal government unprecedented power over the criminal justice system. In 2019, new amendments were passed permitting the categorization of individuals. So this is important that the UAPA in 2019 now permits the categorization of individuals rather than organizations as terrorists. People could be jailed without clear evidence or without even getting bail for months or even decades. A trial is not guaranteed. And if a trial is granted, but the case fails, there's actually no provision in the law that allows the incarcerated person to be released from detention. Now, the most widely covered injustice, and I think rightfully so, which will be a lot of folks will also be talking about, occurred in Bhima, Oregon. It's a town a few hours south of Mumbai on the west coast of India, for those who don't know. Annually on January 1st, so I guess we would have just had the anniversary, Dalits in Bhima Koregaon celebrate the victory of their ancestors over an upper caste ruler as part of the British Army. In 2018, they clashed with Hindu residents during the celebration, which resulted in 16 activists being jailed under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act for inciting violence at the deadly event. 3 years later, no official charges have been brought up against the 16, and all 16 activists were advocates historically for historically marginalized groups such as Dalits to protect their rights and elevate their status in society. Now, I'm saying that as if we have 16. Unfortunately, one of the activists, Father Stan Swami, died in detention due to denial of timely medical treatment. While 3 others, Anand Teltumbe, Sudha Bharwaj, and Varvara Rao, have been granted bail, and activist Gautam Navlaka has been shifted to house arrest, while 11 of the human rights defenders continue to languish in jail without a trial. Now, can you pull up the link? Actually, can you share the screen for the link? So while you all are here, actually, I want you all to pull up, I'm going to put, hopefully there's going to be a URL up there that I want everybody to go to on their phone and they can take action. It is,
Is it on my?
I sent you an email,
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
but it's actually, you could type it in while I'm doing it. It's bit.ly/BK16, and it's actually capital B, capital K 16 petition, all one word. BK16 petition. Yes, it's it's capital B, capital K, 16, then the rest lowercase is petition, all one word. And if you go to that, you will get this screen. You should see this screen here coming up with an action. And it'll just take a minute. You can fill out your first name, last name, your email address, and your country. And you can hit take action now. And you will be urging the Union Home Minister, Amit Shah, to drop all charges against the activists and immediately to release the ones who remain in detention. Pending their release, you will ensure that they're guaranteed, we want guarantee of a prompt, regular, and unrestricted access to medical care and other basic necessities, and to repeal or substantially amend the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So did that link work?
Yep.
Yeah. So before we get started, I'll give you a second here to go ahead and take that action. Before we move to our next speaker, is she?
No, she's not.
Okay. So our next speaker will actually be Mihir Desai, who is an advocate in India. He's going to introduce himself, provide a little bio to me here, just to, I don't have the bio in front of me, just a little bio in terms of who you are and why you're speaking here, and then you will have the floor.
Thank you. I hope I'm clear. Okay. Thanks a lot for inviting me here. Okay, I am a lawyer. I practice mainly on human rights issues in India since last more than 30 years, both civil and criminal aspects of human rights. I am also the national vice president of an organization called PUCL, that is People's Union for Civil Liberties. So that's broadly my background. I'm also involved in some of the cases of the Bhima Koregaon accused, including Father Stan Swami, Anand Teltumde, who recently got bail, and a couple of others. just to add a little bit to what Govind Acharya mentioned about UAPA, I think it's important to realize two or three things. One is that the UAPA, the act itself, okay, one of the major reasons why we are opposing the law is because it denies bail and it makes it incumbent upon the accused, okay, to show that he will not be proved guilty, okay, and only if the court is satisfied at the prima facie stage, at the time of bail, that this person has not committed any offense, okay, then only you will get bail. Now that is, and Supreme Court of India has held that at the time of giving bail, only the police version has to be taken into account, not the defense version. Now that means it becomes virtually impossible to show at the time of getting bail, at the time of applying for bail, that I will not be found guilty, because my defense cannot be looked at. Only the police's version can be looked at. Due to this, a large number of people under UAPA, not only in Bhima Koregaon, but in lots of other cases, have been incarcerated for years together, some even for decades, more than a decade, okay, without getting the benefit of the bail and without the trial having started. So this is one of the major problems which we face in all UAPA cases, including Bhima Koregaon cases. The other problem which, and remember one thing, the UAPA came after what was earlier known as POTA, that is Prevention of Terrorism Act. The present UAPA came after the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Now, Prevention of Terrorism Act at least said one thing. That act was repealed, and then UAPA was amended to make it into an anti-terror law, so-called anti-terror law. Remember one thing, that POTA had a provision which said that the harsh bail conditions, which I just mentioned about, okay, would apply only for the first year of arrest. After the first year of arrest, the normal bail conditions would apply, which means what? That after 1 year, at least you had a chance of getting yourself bailed out on the basis of normal bail conditions. Okay. UAPA does away with that. UAPA does not allow you, okay, to have relaxed bail conditions after 1 year. The stringent bail conditions remain throughout the trial. And that's why people remain in jail for long periods of time. In fact, UAPA is used mainly, okay, to keep people behind bars rather than to convict them. Because the conviction rate under UAPA is much lower than the conviction rate, despite harsh conditions, is much lower than the conviction rate under the normal criminal law. That's one aspect which I just wanted to add. The other aspect which I think, as far as Bhima Koregaon cases are concerned, as you know, the violence on which the people have been, on the basis of which the people have been arrested, happened in 2018, January 1st. Okay? That is more than 5 years back. These people are in prison since, many of these people are in prison since more than 5 years. It is not even the case of the prosecution. It is not even their case. Forget our case, our defense. It is not even their case that at least 10 or 11 were in any way involved in the Bhima Koregaon violence. It is not their case that a single person of the 16 who is arrested was even present when the violence took place. Okay? Was even present when the violence took place. There are cases about 3 or 4 of these people, not all, 3 or 4, were present at a meeting before this violence, 1 day before this violence, where they gave some provocative slogans, etc. That's the sum and substance of their case as far as this violence is concerned. The second aspect of the case which they raised concerns certain documents found on the computers of some of the accused. Now, we were suspecting that these documents which are found, these are not emails, these are not letters, these are screenshots of letters. These were found on computers of 2 or 3 people, referring to many others who were arrested. We were suspecting that these letters were planted, okay, and therefore we got them examined by an international forensic laboratory. And the laboratory has given 5 reports up till now, and each one of these documents on which they are placing reliance on, okay, each one of these documents, according to the lab's findings, are completely, are totally fabricated letters planted on the computers of these persons. They had no knowledge that these documents existed. They had never opened these documents. So these are the only evidence against these people is that there are certain documents found on computers, and those documents, according to the forensic report, are fabricated. The problem is that when you apply for bail under UAPA or any other provision, when you apply for bail and you try to rely on these forensic evidence, the court takes the view that this is your evidence, this is the defense evidence, and can only be relied upon at the time of trial. Okay. So you will rely, the trial may start after 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, we don't know. So I cannot rely on this evidence. The only evidence which goes against me, which I can immediately debunk. Okay, I can't rely on it. I can't get bail on the basis. I can rely on it only at the time of trial, which will be about 7, 8, 9 years down the line. And that is why it becomes extremely difficult. Okay. And what is said about UAPA, that process is the punishment. Okay? It's not that I don't expect any of these persons to be found guilty at the end of the trial, but how long they will have to spend in the jail. Now slowly, one after the other, people have started coming out on bail. But how long even that will take for everybody to come out on bail, I'm very unsure about that. And one last thing I wanted to mention, okay, about the UAPA was that, as PUCL, as I mentioned to you, I'm part of an organization called People's Union of Civil Liberties. We had conducted a study of the UAPA cases, which were between 2009 to 2022, based on the data given by what is known as NIA. NIA is the central government's investigating agency. That is National Investigating Agency, which again acts at the behest of the Home Ministry. It's not an independent agency, though on paper, of course, everybody is independent. It's not an independent agency. It acts at the behest of the Central Home Ministry. And many of the UAPA, most of the UAPA cases now are in fact being investigated by this agency. When we did a study, we found out that at least in 36% of the cases, okay, while people were charged with terrorism, there was no terrorist incident at all. There was no bombing. There was no gun found. There was nobody killed, nobody even attacked, nobody even. 36% of the cases were based purely on conspiracy to commit in future some act. Okay? So there is no act of terrorism at all. Okay? So 36% of the cases, and when I say 36% of the cases, each case may involve more than 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. Okay? So 36% of the cases are those cases where there is no act of terrorism at all, okay? Even alleged. Okay? So that is a situation we are facing right now. Therefore, while we are calling for a repeal of this so-called anti-terror law, okay, because we also feel that terrorism can be tackled by the normal criminal law easily. You don't need a special law to tackle terrorism. The existing criminal law is enough and sufficient to tackle any act of terror which happens. And so while we are calling for repeal of UAPA, we are also immediately calling for repeal of the provisions which make bail very, very difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mihir. We're going to have questions at the end, so stand by. That was great. Thank you for that detail. Our next speaker is actually going to be here. It's going to be Safa Ahmed, who is right here, and she's from the Indian American Muslim Council, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the forensics behind Bhima Koregaon case, but also when you do, just tell us a little bit about yourself as well. So, Safa?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to Hindus for Human Rights for having me here. I am a media associate and advocacy assistant with Indian American Muslim Council. Sorry about that. So I'm a media associate and an advocacy assistant with the Indian American Muslim Council, and it's a great honor for me to be here with you today. So digital forensics is a dry and technical field, but the consequences of digital attacks play out like a vivid, terrifying, and painful movie. With the help of technical experts, journalists, and activists, I have prepared for you this narrative of what was revealed in the forensic analysis of the hard drives of 3 of the BK-16, Rona Wilson, Surendra Gadling, and Father Stan Swamy. Now I want you to picture this. 83-year-old Jesuit priest, Father Stan Swamy, who has dedicated his life to fighting for the rights of India's indigenous Adivasi people, is sitting in his spare room near the city of Ranchi in the state of Jharkhand, and working on his computer. It is nearing 9 p.m. on June 11th, 2019, so Father Stan, who turns in early, switches his computer off and goes to bed. Remember the date and time, because these details will be crucial later on. He is rudely awakened early the next morning on June 12th, before sunrise. The police have come to raid his residence. They take his computer away. After the courts fail to grant Father Stan anticipatory bail, this gentle old man is arrested by the police on October 8th, 2019. The police claim that incriminating documents have been found on Father Stan's hard drive, much like they were found on the hard drives of Rona Wilson and Surendra Gadling before him. These documents allegedly link Father Stan to the Maoist insurgency in central India. It is on the basis of these electronic documents that Father Stan is arrested under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or the UAPA, a law that makes securing bail next to impossible. Father Stan and the other arrestees repeatedly deny all knowledge of these documents, both privately to friends and family and to the police. Their conviction is so strong that their defense team finds it necessary to get hold of copies of these hard drives and send them to a reputable digital forensics firm in Boston, USA for analysis. The firm selected for this process is Arsenal Consulting, famous for working on the Boston Marathon bombing case. Chain of custody is carefully maintained to get verified copies to Arsenal Consulting. The reason bail is denied is to allow investigators to continue interviewing arrestees, but not a single investigator finds it important to interview Father Stan in the slow months after his arrest, but prison authorities do their utmost to make his life hell. They even deny him a sipper and straw to drink water from, which he needs because of his Parkinson's diagnosis. They refuse to give him adequate medical health care. In prison, Father Stan's already frail health further deteriorates. Then sometime in the summer of 2021, with investigators still not having spoken to Father Stan once, he contracts COVID-19. Efforts to move Father Stan to a hospital are delayed in the courts, whose intervention comes too late. On July 5th, 2021, short hours before his next medical bail hearing, Father Stan Swamy passes away. He is still in custody of the Indian state. So what were these incriminating files that had such devastating consequences, leading to the arrest of 16 of India's most prominent human rights defenders across thousands of days? How did these files come into their computers? By analyzing the disk images of these computers, Arsenal Consulting made a series of startling findings. As early as 2014, multiple emails containing malware were sent to the email IDs of the BK-16. Take the example of Rona Wilson. Rona Wilson got an email from the personal email account of the poet Varavara Rao, asking him to open an attachment. Thinking nothing of it, Rona tried to open it, but it didn't open. More emails came from Rao's email account, urging him to try a second attachment, then a third. Finally, when Rona Wilson opened the third attachment, his computer became infected. It became clear from the forensic analysis that prior to Rona Wilson, Rao's email was hacked. Hackers were using these hacked email addresses to target the friends of Rao, those who trusted him enough to open attachments from him. A similar method was used to target Surendra Gadling, and Father Stan Swamy was infected with this malware, a remote access Trojan called NetWire, on October 2014. From 2014 till their arrest, every single thing these 3 did was surveilled. Every single letter they typed, from documents to emails to even passwords, was logged and sent to the hackers. As many as 24,000 files and folders on Father Stan's computer were surveilled. Not just the computers, but every device attached to the computers, like flash drives and external hard drives, were also surveilled. Of course, the Pegasus scandal shows that few of us are safe from the threat of digital surveillance. But what happened to the BK-16 was far worse. In 2017, the hackers went one step further. They began to plant incriminating letters and documents on the hard drives of Rona Wilson, Surinder Gadling, and Stan Swamy. The first documents entered Father Stan's hard drive in July 2017. Note that this was a full 5 months before the riots broke out in Pima Koregan, the case that supposedly prompted an investigation of the BK-16 in the first place. By June 2018, both Rona Wilson and Surinder Gadling were arrested. When the names of other prominent activists turned up in these incriminating letters, they too were arrested, but the hacker was not done. The hacker was still surveilling Father Stan, and as late as June 5th, 2019, he was still planting incriminating documents on Father Stan's computer. We have returned now to where our story began. The evening of June 11th, 2019, the clock is nearing 9 p.m. Father Stan is working on his computer, but little does he know that the hacker is also working at the same time, furiously trying to erase his tracks. Arsenal Consulting have found detailed logs showing the hacker's attempts. The hacker inputting commands, trying to delete files, the hacker making mistakes when writing code, then correcting them. All of this is visible to us in the forensic report. There is one last command the hacker wants to execute to finish their cleanup job, but before they can execute it, Father Stan Swamy, the 83-year-old Jesuit priest who likes to turn in early, switches off his computer. This allows Arsenal Consulting to find even more proof of the hacking. A few short hours later, Father Stan's computer is seized. How did the hackers know to cover their tracks a few short hours before the seizure of the device? How did they know that the police were coming the next day? That's a question we cannot directly answer, but cybersecurity experts have provided some clues. Cybersecurity firms SentinelOne is the other major international firm to verify these findings and use them for their own investigations. Their areas of specialization is identifying the threat actors or networks of hackers and tracking their activities across the world. After months of study, SentinelOne determined that this threat actor shares infrastructure with other known threat actors linked to the Indian state. Later, collaborating with Wired magazine, SentinelOne showed that hackers retained control of devices and used them to target other activists after the Pune police had seized the devices. The report in Wired alleges direct coordination between the Pune police and the hackers. Each of these reports has been vetted by the Washington Post and independently verified by several leading digital forensics experts, including Amnesty Tech and the University of Toronto. Now, by now, there is no doubt in anybody's mind that the evidentiary basis for the entire Bhima Koregan case, based on these planted digital files, lies in tatters. But because of the stringent provisions of the UAPA, and because the trial has not begun yet, this evidence cannot be brought to exonerate the BK-16. And so the cases roll on, including a case filed by the Jesuits in India to posthumously exonerate Father Stan. Father Stan's work and legacy continue long after his passing. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Human Rights Defenders and the Martin Ennals Prize in 2022. We now hope that this latest shocking revelation about the planting of evidence on Father Stan's hard drive finally awakens the courts. The BK-16 deserved not just immediate bail, but also the full exoneration at the earliest possible date. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Safa, for that. That was great. And you could actually read the full report on the hacking. It's quite a detailed set of reports on the either through Amnesty International's tech site or Citizen Lab, which is part of the University of Toronto. They have a very exhaustive research of it. It's technical and everything, and you can really get into the details there if you like. Finally, our next speaker is actually going to be on YouTube. It's Yug Mohit Chaudhry. He's an attorney also in India, and he's going to speak in an interview with Raju. And it's on YouTube, and we're going to play that now for us. So, enter. I'm going to move, so I'm not in the screen.
So this 31 minutes?
Go back to the beginning.
Yeah, it's at the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Chaudhry, for joining us. We wish you could have joined us in our live webinar, but nonetheless, we are happy to have you record your comments to some of the questions we have. The topic, of course, is the UAPA law and the prisoners of conscience that it has actually created in India, which is quite alarming. We have a lot of questions today for you to get some background on what is happening on the ground. So perhaps we can start out by asking you, I know you have been very active as an author and you've been writing a lot about abolishing death penalty in India. So what got you interested in wanting to defend Sudha Bharadwaj, for example? And do you have any other prisoners of conscience that you are representing?
Mr. Rajgopal, I represent 3 people out of the 16 in the Bhima Koregaon, the Elgar Parishad case.
Okay.
I represent Sudha Bharadwaj, Gautam Navlakha, and Professor Hani Babu. Now, I'm a lawyer, as you know, so I got involved because I was asked to get involved. I got a brief. They landed up in my office and asked me to represent them at various points of time individually. And a case like this, you can't say no, because the odds are stacked against them, heavily stacked against them. They are single individuals who have led admirable lives so far, lives dedicated to public service and public causes, and who are now being targeted by the government with all its might and arsenal. And it's really a David and Goliath fight. It's very difficult to walk away from it and still retain some sense of fair play or conscience. You can't just wash your hands and say, well, it's their problem. So that's how I got in.
Thank you. As I understand, Sudhaji is out on bail. What about the other 2, Hani Babu and Gautam Navlakha?
Gautam Navlakha is now in house arrest, so he's been shifted out of jail. And Hani Babu is in jail. His bail application is now pending and it's going to be filed in the Supreme Court very shortly. It's recently been rejected by the Bombay High Court.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about what your experience has been in representing these 3 individuals in a very vitiated atmosphere in India, where lawyers representing some of the activists have always had, trolling and concerns about safety. How have you faced any public, I don't know what you call it, abuse, if you will, and how you are dealing with that, if any?
Mr. Rajagopal, I'm fortunate not to be on social media, and therefore I have had absolutely no trolling done. I've had no online abuse. I don't know if I have. I don't know about it. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on, what's that called, Instagram. I'm not even on WhatsApp. So I've had nothing. I've had no threats of any kind made against me. And in that sense, I've not been personally endangered at all. I've been allowed to do what I want.
Okay.
Unhindered. Absolutely unhindered. And I think that's a tribute to the situation even in India, even today, still. That even though I'm doing these high-profile cases of people the government desperately wants to put away and throw away the key, still, at least that modicum of decency still obtains.
Thanks. That's very good to hear that. In fact, I'm in your ranks, where I seldom look at social media posts because it's more pain than it is worth it. So I'm glad you're not facing any of those issues. Some of them is when you see abuse on social media, it has a larger than image impact on people. So I too actually leave it to others in Hindus for Human Rights to look at social media and respond to it. The other question I have is, I'm not as familiar with the detailed technical aspect of the UAPA law. Clearly, it predates this current government in different forms and was amended as soon as this government came to power. And what I'm interested in knowing is, it's still being positioned as an anti-terror law. And what are some of the provisions in the current UAPA that makes it more like an anti-dissent law than an anti-terror law, in your view?
I don't think it is an anti-dissent law.
Okay.
So let's get some things very clear. Clear at the beginning.
Okay.
The UAPA was introduced in an earlier avatar shortly after independence. In its present avatar, it was introduced into law in 1967. The draconian provisions, which basically are procedural in nature, I'll tell you what they are in a moment, were introduced by the Congress government in 2008. And the recent amendments made by the BJP government are only giving them the power to declare individuals terrorists and do a few other things regarding seizing of property, which were already there in other forms earlier. So the BJP government has not done very much to amend the law. If at all you have to lay the blame for this law on anyone's door, it will be at the Congress door. The substantive provisions themselves are really unobjectionable if one takes the view that every country reserves for itself the right to defend itself and legislate so as to prevent attacks on its sovereignty, on its integrity, on its territorial and its safety. Now, this law is attempting to do that. It's attempting to protect the sovereignty and integrity and the safety of the country against terrorist attacks and terrorist acts. It outlaws support for terrorism, financial support, or any other kind of practical support for terrorism and for banned activities. These banned activities are also defined in terms of assaults on the sovereignty and integrity of India. In terms of the offenses created by this law, they are really unexceptionable. They are not at all unusual. They will be found in most countries around the world. As I said, most countries reserve the right to legislate, to pass laws to protect themselves. And in that regard, this law is no different. However, the procedure is what makes it oppressive. Now, there have been two important procedural amendments which were brought about by the Congress government in 2008, both through Section 43, which was introduced in modified form in 2008. The first is it extended the period permissible for detention without charge sheet from 90 to 180 days, only for UAPA offenses. Now, under the normal law of the land, as it stands even today, the longest period a person can be detained in custody without the filing of a charge sheet, which is the completion of the police investigation, is 90 days. But for UAPA cases, it is now 180 days. When I say now, I mean post 2008. So you can detain a person up to 180 days without laying a formal charge sheet, without the police concluding its investigation. The period of police custody has also been increased from 15 to 30 days. And finally, and this is the worst aspect of this law, the law of bail has been made so difficult as to render it virtually a dead letter. Bail has become virtually impossible. Now, that, according to me, is an anathema for a criminal lawyer. Bail is given pending trial. And bail can never be an excuse to punish somebody without a formal judgment. Bail can never be an excuse to just throw someone in jail and lock someone up in jail and throw away the key forever. So that's what it has become now. It is a form of pre-trial punishment and uncamouflaged. It's unembarrassed, it's unashamed pre-trial punishment. It's become virtually, because of the conditions required to get bail, you have to prove that you are innocent at bail stage. And you have to prove that on the basis of documents collected by the prosecution, not by documents and evidence that you may supply of your own. Your evidence and documents cannot be looked at this stage. So on the basis of material collected by the police, you will have to argue that you are actually innocent. Now, in normal law, the standard for bail is only you first show that there is no prima facie case. And then you can even argue after that, that even if there is a prima facie case, I pose no flight risk and I am not a threat to witnesses, and therefore I should be released on bail pending trial. There is no purpose served by keeping me in jail any further. All this has now been abandoned. For the UAPA law, these are irrelevant considerations. Prima facie case is an irrelevant consideration, as is what is formally called the triple test, that I will not abscond, that I do not pose a threat to witnesses or to other evidence, tampering with evidence. So you can have needless, absolutely, utterly needless detention in prison. Keeping in mind how long it takes to complete the investigation and then to complete the trial, this form of pre-trial detention can run into years. And that's really where the sting of this law lies. It allows the government to keep people in jail for years without trial.
Now, where does the 180 days fit in then? If the provision of the law is 180 days without filing charges, or are they ignoring that provision, or they're finding another loophole to keep extending?
Yes, I'll tell you. So the charge sheet doesn't have to be a complete charge sheet. So they file a charge sheet and they produce and they file that they say we have finished for the time being, but we are continuing our investigation and we reserve the right to file supplementary charge sheets. And they'll just keep filing supplementary charge sheets and they'll just keep on investigating. The trial won't begin. And then even if it begins, It goes at a snail's pace forever and forever and forever. And that's how they managed to keep you in jail for so long. Now, if you look at this case itself, people have been in jail for over 3 years.
Yeah, we have actually total number of days that someone in our group has racked up in just the Bhima Koregan case, how many total days they've already spent in prison. This is very, very informative personally, and I'm sure to the audience as well, to distinguish whether the law itself is bad or whether or just a procedure, not just the procedure that have been added on to it. And that clarification is very, very important. And I learned something from your detailed description of it. Thank you so much. The question that comes to when we talk about the Bhima Koregan case, we have read several reports of evidence being planted on at least 2 or 3 of the individuals, which might have then been used to accuse other people. Why is there not some sort of a summary action on the part of the courts to throw out all the people arrested under the planted evidence rather than continue to punish them?
Because at this stage of the proceedings, you cannot look at defense evidence. And these reports are defense evidence. They've been commissioned by the defense. Arsenal Consulting, I think, is the one you're referring to, the entity in America who has conducted these studies of the hard disks of the accused. They've been commissioned by the accused themselves. And this is part of the defense case. And at this stage, the defense case cannot be looked at either for the stage of bail or for the purpose of throwing out the prosecution's case, which is called discharge, pre-trial discharge. Defense evidence can only be produced at the end of the prosecution case during the trial. And that stage is nowhere near reached at all. The trial has not even begun. So these reports which show quite clearly that evidence has been planted onto the accused computers, which has been used to implicate other accused persons, this evidence cannot be looked at this stage at all under Indian law.
Okay.
And hence, case cannot be thrown out for that reason.
Okay. Thank you. Ria, do you have any questions for Mr. Chaudhry?
I don't. I think the one question I had was answered in the course of Mr. Chaudhry's answer for another one of your questions. So
Okay.
thank you for a very complete answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Ria. Mr. Chaudhry, I want to close it with a couple of things. Do you have any kind of comments about what next in terms of the Bhima Koregan, the detainees, if I want to call it that? It sounds more like a detention. But also, I would really love to hear something about a little bit about your work on abolishing death penalty, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience would be very interested in hearing your views on where things stand in India with regard to your campaign.
Okay, I'll just reserve the death penalty for a little later. I'll answer your first question first. What is really unique in this case? Let me just tell you a little bit about what you call prisoners of conscience and detainees. There are no substantive offenses created in this law or any law in India which penalize free thought. All right. So they are not, in that sense, just because they adhere to a particular belief system, they're not being prosecuted for that in law. They are being alleged, it is being alleged against them that they've committed some very serious offenses. The allegations against them do not pertain to subscribing to a particular belief system merely. It is that they are members of the banned Naxalite organization. And the Naxalites, of course, have been waging an armed struggle against the government of India for a long, long time. They have been attacking convoys, policemen, army people, villages, schools even. So they are not really, there may be some, people of course have a lot of sympathy and support for the Naxalites for various reasons. But they haven't really acquitted themselves too well in many ways. And the government would be perfectly justified in outlawing them for the reasons I've just mentioned. Now, the charges against the accused in the Bhima Koregaon case pertain to not just support and membership of the Naxalite organization. It doesn't stop there. The charges and the allegations extend to, the allegations at least, extend to actually committing terrorist acts, participating in the conspiracy to commit terrorist acts, arranging financial and other support for the Naxalite organization, procuring arms and ammunition for the Naxalite organization. So they are not the people who are, they're not being, I believe, and a lot of people may believe, that these people are actually being prosecuted for their different views under the guise of having committed offenses under this terrorist act, the UAPA. And that I believe very strongly to be true. I don't believe any of these people have committed the acts ascribed to them. I think they're being prosecuted. I think they're being persecuted for being staunch opponents of this government and of having spoken out against the government in various ways. And they're being prosecuted, but not for that, ostensibly. They're being, under the guise of having committed these very serious terrorist acts, they're being prosecuted for that. So let's be very clear. They're not formally, in the sense, prisoners of conscience. They are being charged with very serious terrorist activity. I think a few other things I'd like to tell you about this case. I've done a large number of terrorist cases and UAPA cases in the course of my practice. However, there are some unique things about this case. I have never seen such sophisticated planting of evidence as I've seen in this case. In planting and fabrication of evidence is routine in India. It's done rampantly by the police for various reasons. They're understaffed, undertrained, poorly motivated, inefficient, various reasons. But it's routine and it's easy to spot and easy to demolish. Not so in this case. It's really been done in a manner unprecedented anywhere in the world. It's been done in a very, very sophisticated manner, which is extremely difficult to detect and prove. The government has gone twice the distance, much more than twice the distance, in order to get these people. What it has shown is a resolve I have never seen in any government hitherto in the prosecution of cases. They have just decided to pull out all the stops and bring in the heavy artillery. And they have determined that they are going to go after these people and for whatever reason, make examples out of them. The prosecution has been so vicious and bloody-minded that they have opposed, I mean, the smallest of requests: mosquito nets, slippers, zippers, warm clothing, books, you name it. I mean, things which are far removed from personal liberty, from bail and things like that. Medical treatment in private hospitals. They have opposed just about asking for a glass of water. I mean, they have short of that, they've opposed everything. And the other thing which is really startling and deeply disturbing and disappointing has been the approach and the attitude of the judiciary to this case. It was said of the judiciary during the emergency that the government asked the judges only to bow, but the judges decided to crawl. And one is seeing that over here. In large measure, the judges have been subdued, they have been overawed, they have been numbed. Their judicial senses have been numbed. They have decided that they are going to rubber stamp the government's efforts and go along with it. It's really shameful, the manner in which the judiciary has allowed this case to proceed. You see, Mr. Rajagopal, the evidence that has been adduced against the accused is legally inadmissible. A law student would tell you that the evidence that they have produced in court, in the charge sheets on which they propose to rely, is legally inadmissible. It is hollow and legally inadmissible. But no judge will say that, even though they've had plenty of opportunity to say that. No judge will say that. And even though, I mean, as I say, a law student can see it. It's like that story about the emperor's clothes. Everybody can see he's naked, but nobody will say it. And that has been the most disappointing aspect of this case. I have never seen the judiciary so compromised in such a systematic manner. See, Mr. Rajagopal, abuse of law by the government is nothing new. My grandfather was in prison during the emergency by the Congress and by Indira Gandhi. He was brutally tortured. When he was released from jail, he was so unwell because of the torture. He was so damaged that he died shortly after. My entire family holds the Congress government responsible for his murder. Governments over the ages have abused the law. This is nothing unique. Of course, the level of sophistication that has happened is very different. And of course, the approach and the attitude of the judiciary, as I said, is now something deeply troubling. Abuse of law is nothing new. I don't think I have anything else to say, particularly unless there's something you wish to ask me. I'll be happy to answer this question. We can talk about that penalty a little later, unless there's nothing else, then I can tell you a little bit about that. Otherwise, if there are any other questions, please go ahead.
Okay, I think Ria has the last question. Ria?
Sure. I think for the audience, one thing that will be really helpful is, a lot of us are outside of India. So how can we who are outside of India be helpful or, take action on these issues?
Make a noise. Make as much of a noise as you can.
Yes, we will do that. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll probably end here for the purpose of the web.
That was Mr. Chaudhry, who had some great comments. I actually learned quite a bit about both the case and the law that I didn't know before. So I'm really happy to have gotten his perspective on it. So now we're going to open it up for a discussion and a question and an answer. And it's probably, there's going to be some on Zoom, but my preference is going to be definitely more on in person. However, I guess it's all up here. Going to answer the question. Let's see. Hold on, don't. This is the first time I'm seeing these questions, so. So Matthew's question, I think, is mostly rhetorical. I think in general, I think for human rights violations. So the action, one of the actions that I mean, the link that I shared with you earlier is one that you can use to take action. I think there's a matter of getting educated about the issues would be I think very important. Yeah. Does anyone have a question? Actually, I'll probably start. Go ahead. Can you say your name actually, because I'd like to just.
Sure. My name is Srinivas Raman. Question is there, or to the lawyer, is there a constitutional basis in the Indian?
Sorry, can you repeat the question in the microphone?
Sure.
Okay, people on Zoom can hear.
Is there a constitutional basis on which the procedure is punishment can be challenged under the Indian Constitution or not? Is this a futile effort where even the Supreme Court has stamped the law as stated by the lawyers as acceptable, or can this be challenged as being fundamentally in conflict with the guaranteed liberty?
Could we ask?
Mihir, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I got
Okay,
I
why
got
don't you
the
answer
question.
Yep.
See, it's like this, that before UAPA came in, initially the anti-terror law in India was what is known as TADA, that is a Terrorist Affected Disturbed Areas Act, etc. That was replaced, and it was the next law which was brought in was POTA, that is Prevention of Terrorism Act. Both of these laws were challenged in the Supreme Court of India on grounds which we have been arguing about. Okay, but the Supreme Court, you see, when it comes to, as soon as the Union of India, the central government talks about security of the state, threat to security, everybody bows down. And then anything, and it's like your Patriot Act, something like that, which is in USA, something like that. That everybody then accepts that, okay, whatever let's not interfere with the state's immunity and impunity in doing what it wants to do. So both of these laws were upheld by the Supreme Court. Similarly, in the Northeast, there is an act called of India. There is an act called Armed Forces Special Powers Act, AFSPA, which is equally draconian. Even that was upheld by the Supreme Court. So while there are challenges pending in the Supreme Court concerning this law, this very law, okay, what at the highest the Supreme Court will do is dilute some of the provisions, not strike down the law. Hopefully dilute the provisions concerning bail or something about charge sheet. They might dilute it a little bit, but I do not anticipate the Supreme Court, no matter how radical it is, okay, to strike down an anti-terror law in India in the present situation. That's how I look at it.
A quick follow-up.
Sure.
Quick follow-up. Specifically with respect to the dilution, since the bail has been stated as the predominant issue and the continuation, which is where the procedure is the punishment becomes the law in practice, is there, again, under the Constitution, is there a basis for challenging, and is there hope that the court at least would grant or nullify those provisions instead of nullifying the law as a whole?
See, the Constitution of India makes freedom of, right to life and personal liberty as part of the fundamental rights chapter. So personal liberty is part of the fundamental rights chapter. but all the fundamental rights are subject to what are known as reasonable restrictions. Okay. Therefore, like we have challenged on behalf of the Bhima Koregaon people, some of the provisions of UAPA. We have not challenged UAPA itself. We have challenged the bail provision of UAPA, saying that this particular provision is egregious and this needs to be either struck down or diluted. So that's what we are asking for. Similar thing had happened in Tada and Pota. It didn't yield much success. We hope that this time, because what happens is, while it is true that what Yug said, the speaker before me, that on paper it may not be an anti-dissent law, but when we look at laws, we are not looking at what it says on paper, but how it works at the ground level. And at the ground level, it has worked only as an anti-dissent law and nothing else. Okay, it's mainly worked as an anti-dissent law and nothing else at the ground level. On paper, it may be very, very flamboyant in its description of what is terrorism and terrorist act and unlawful activity, etc., etc. That's wonderful, but at the ground level, it has become an anti-dissent law, and the only reason why it has become so strongly an anti-dissent law is because of the bail provision. I mean, one of the main reasons is bail provisions, and we are seeking its dilution. Let's see how it works. I just wanted to add one more thing here. Sometimes the courts also dilute the provisions in individual cases. For instance, now the courts say that if somebody has been in jail for 4 or 5 years, okay, since right to speedy trial is a right which is also a fundamental right to speedy trial, and since the trial is likely to take a long time, the person should be released on bail even under UAPA. So in some cases, they have been releasing people under UAPA after you spend about 4 or 5 years. So you don't have to wait for 10 years. Not that it's much of a solace to the person who is there for 4 or 5 years, but that's one way in which they have done it. Also in Anand Tiltumde's case, in Bhima Koregaon, we have been able to get bail on merit, which was the first bail on merit which we were able to get under the Bhima Koregaon case. So that's not on some on technicality or medical bail or something, but that the court coming to the conclusion that there is no prima facie evidence that he's guilty of any of the allegations. So things are changing; they'll slowly change. The courts also realize the misuse of the law which has been happening. I wouldn't call it a misuse. I think it's a use of the law that has been happening. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Other questions or comments?
Govind, there's quite a few on the Q&A in the Zoom.
Let's go back to this. Okay. What effect of current disclosures of Gujarat violence at BBC?
I think Mr. Batra is asking if the latest BBC documentary release on Narendra Modi will have any impact, I would say broadly, in the legal environment.
Well, let me tell you, I was one of the lawyers handling Zakia Jafri's case, which went to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court gave us not only a clean chit to the central government, but also directed the Tisra Setalwad, who was one of the co-petitioners, be arrested. I mean, be put in the docks, and then she was arrested. Yesterday night, the Indian government has issued notices to YouTube and various other service providers that they have to remove this particular film, the BBC documentary, from its site. And from what I hear, it has already been removed. So in India, it is not easily available. They have removed it, saying that this is some foreign governments and foreign powers conspiracy against India. So they've already removed the documentary. That's what I hear.
Has it completely been removed, or it has only been removed in India?
India.
It's only India. I would say that it hasn't completely been removed in India either. There are ways around it, but
Yeah.
that's
think-
what
I
my
think
understanding.
Yes, but you're right about that, but I also would like to discuss that on Zoom.
Uh,
There are links available to the archives, where you can see.
Down. You have to- Then you can watch it, and you can record it.
Yeah.
Second one is actually, I think Swati's is related.
The anonymous one would be.
Yes. I mean, here you're answering all of these questions, but I was wondering if you have any comments about the question
No, Govind.
here. I'm sorry, yes, which is about Umar Khalid and others who are incarcerated. It affects their future and that of their families and adversely impacts the social fabric. What possible solutions are there to undo the injustice? I mean, I don't know if you have any comments on that one.
You are asking me? Are you asking?
Well,
me,
if you have
Govind?
any comments, I can also.
Yeah, see, I just wanted to make one more comment.
Sure.
That while it is true that, I mean, I would not see Congress and BJP in the same line. Let me put it very clearly. That while it is true that Congress also abused the law, and Congress and some of these laws are gifts of the Congress government, BJP government has realized its weaponization to the maximum. It is like, it's something like what Shylock says in Merchant of Venice, that the villainy you teach me, I shall execute. It will be hard, but I shall better the instructions. So it's so I think it's a qualitatively different approach to UAPA and to some of the draconian laws by the BJP than it was by the Congress. So that's one thing I just wanted to. I have a slight difference of opinion there from you. The other thing is, remember one thing, that both under TADA and POTA, the earlier laws, there was a provision which mentioned that if the prosecution is not bona fide against any person, okay, the persons who are prosecuting can themselves be prosecuted. Okay, that is, a police investigating agency could be prosecuted. There was a provision under that anti-terror law at that time. That provision has been done away with under the UAPA. So UAPA does not allow you to even prosecute if you are being prosecuted in a mala fide manner. What you're talking about, Umar Khalid, or for instance, Siddiq Kappan, or many others, okay, who are in jail. It's a very long battle, and we will have to fashion some new legal tools, okay, apart from campaign tools and campaign mechanisms, to ensure that they are at least their life is restored back to some kind of normalcy. We are still right now. We are at a stage where we are just trying to get people out of jail. What you are saying is right, that there has to be some kind of a long-term solution to this, and we will work with all of you collectively on that, I'm sure. But at the moment, our emphasis is to get them out of jail, and then look at how to ensure that this doesn't happen in future. You know, that's all I can respond to. Thanks.
Please say your name also.
Yeah, my name is Alok. I have actually, the questions I have in two parts. One is that, is there any kind of provision in Indian law, whether it is under UAPA or outside of it? You said in the UAPA you don't have an option, but outside of UAPA, in any case, where the prosecuting agency can be prosecuted itself for a mala fide intention for filing the case, the one. And second thing is, let's say if there is nothing like that, considering police was also a state subject, is it possible to convince some of the state governments, which are of the opposite party, to at least create a law in those states which can allow the police to be prosecuted in case they bring mala fide intention? The idea is to kind of set up an example. So when the government changes in some of the states, where a counter example of proof can be established. It doesn't make sense. I'm just.
Do you want me to answer that?
Why don't
or,
you, why don't you take, if you have an answer, I mean, I could also answer
Yes.
those, if you're.
See the second question. The first question, I think I dealt with the second question. Let me put it this way. Okay. The Communist Party of India, Marxist, CPIM, okay, CPM, which is a recognized party which rules in Kerala state, okay, comes on various panels and says we oppose UAPA. Mamta Banerjee, who rules West Bengal, comes on various panels and says that we oppose UAPA. But in their own states, they use UAPA regularly. Okay, so one of the things when I talk to my friends from those parties is that at least ensure that your states don't use UAPA. Okay, I mean, if central government swoops down on you and uses UAPA, in some cases it's a different matter. But at least ensure that you don't use UAPA. That is not. I mean, that is the level at which we are, right now. Thanks.
Now, wasn't it also the case that the, correct me if I'm wrong, Mihir, but the NIA took over the Bhima Koregaon case after the Maharashtrian government changed to non-BJP after it went to the coalition.
Yeah, Shiv Sena.
Right. That was so.
Coalition.
So there's ways to the the central government can do it. That the state under the.
Just wanted to say one thing about that. That you see, normally law and order is a state subject. So the state government has the jurisdiction over taking any action in respect of law and order. Earlier, that is before NIA came into the picture, the only other central agency was the CBI, that is Central Bureau of Investigation, which is a central agency. But the law provided that Central Bureau of Investigation could take up a case only if the state government consents to it. Okay, so without the state government's consent, the central government could not take up any case in a state. Okay, that was outside the jurisdiction. The NIA Act changes all that, because NIA Act gives power to the central government to take over any cases under some of the scheduled offenses, including UAPA, without taking sanction of the state government, without taking permission of the state government. So that's why NIA is being used very exhaustively in a number of states where BJP is not in power. So you find NIA being used very extensively in those kind of states. That is happening quite a lot.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Ishaq. Kind of related to what brother said just now. Yeah, let's say like after like whatever trial and finally court exonerated the under trials, and if court found the evidence that there was some malicious act by the police, can't we file the cases against the police?
Did you hear the question, Mihir? I mean, I could.
Yeah, I got. I thought, yeah, okay, fine. It's quite unfortunate that Yug is not here right now. But anyway, what I was saying was that you see, it's an open issue in the sense that, as I mentioned, unlike the earlier terror laws, this Terror Act does not provide for any provision which permits the prosecution in respect of malicious prosecution, permits any kind of accountability in respect of malicious prosecution. It does not say so. That provision which was there earlier has been dropped. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot do it. Okay, but we have not yet come to a stage where we have because the trials are still going on, etc., etc. And even when people are acquitted, people are ultimately discharged. Most of the times, the courts do not make any kind of insinuations against the prosecution. They just say that enough evidence is not there. Now, in a case like this, where planted evidence is there, if tomorrow the court comes to the conclusion that the evidence was planted, it becomes a different ballgame altogether. And let's see how it goes. I mean, that's the reality right now.
There's a question for you, Govind.
Yeah, I'll get to. I think he wants to follow up on that.
Sorry, just one.
Yeah.
Doesn't Supreme Court has the power under the article, the Constitution article, I think 142, to create a law from scratch, or to like how they dealt with the Ram Janambhoomi case, where they created a law or passed a ruling under section 142, I believe, if that's the correct section I'm remembering. Can't they create a superseding framework to deal with such malpractices? Can't a lawyer approach like that?
Did you hear that question? I think that was a follow-up to what you were saying.
Okay, yeah. Supreme Court is a power under, see, 141 to Article 141 and 142. 142 is the power to do all things necessary to ensure justice. Okay, I mean, that's a broad power. Okay, it's a broad power. But you are in a Supreme Court, as I told you earlier, is very reluctant to see. They are doing what in Israeli human rights activists, or in South Africa apartheid, what human rights activists used to say. They are doing pink washing at the moment. Okay, in the sense that on certain issues, when the international community matters, whether it's gay rights, whether it's children's rights, disability rights, they'll come out with very, very progressive judgments, which are necessary. I'm not disputing that. Okay, but when it comes to security of state and things like that, okay, it's a very conservative court by and large. Okay, the Supreme Court, and therefore, can they do something? Yes, they can strike down the bail provisions if they want to. Will they do it? Very doubtful. That's how I would look at it.
There was a question about whether Amnesty was going to designate some of the detainees under UAPA as prisoners of conscience. The answer is, frankly, it's unlikely. The reason is that and there's actually a vigorous debate, not actually about the UAPA cases, but about a different case in Russia, actually, that where because the designation is so strict, because Amnesty back in, I don't know, the 1960s invented that term, they are very strict about who they designate as prisoners of conscience. And so anyone accused under UAPA will most likely not be designated as a prisoner of conscience.
Is there an alternative terminology?
Well, there you could call them human rights defenders and who are jailed human rights defenders, or political prisoners, or other terms. But I mean, you all can use the term. I'm not saying that, I mean, anyone can use that term, but it's not something that Amnesty is going to be using.
A couple of brief questions.
Yeah. I see there is a link. There are other links available as well. So just as an FYI. Right, okay, so that's a comment about the there could be compensation in theory, but it's gonna be a long slog. Unfortunately. Just some new social media new yeah, I mean, to the social media rules, I mean, I think that's right. I think it'll allow misinformation of all types really to spread potentially. Yeah, I mean, that's a comment. I think that's taken, well taken. Next one. Matt, there's one.
Can you read out the question louder?
Oh, that please shed some info on Indian government's new social media rules to tackle fake news. Press Information Bureau has been given sweeping powers to ban posts on social media platforms. PIB is just PR apparatus of government of India. Dissent is systematically.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Question is that the government is trying to change the constitution. And do you think it will succeed? I mean, there are many things on the street that have been changed, the law, but do you think that they can actually change the constitution, or they can do it through the parliament?
Which part of the constitution? Which one are you talking about? Provision?
You know, changing the Indian government is trying to change the constitution and make India a Hindu state. So for that, they'll have to change the constitution. And so I would like to know his views on that.
My assessment is they will not want to dramatically change the constitution for the simple reason that if any constitution, like any legal document, can be interpreted in 10 different ways. So you can have, I mean, you can say you can talk about freedom of religion as a fundamental right and still have anti-conversion laws. Okay, on your book, state after state. You can talk about citizenship being open to everybody, but you can still have CA and RC. Okay, across the country. A lot will depend on how Supreme Court reacts to these things. If the Supreme Court is pliant, there is no reason for the government to change the constitution. It is only if the Supreme Court asserts itself, okay, by striking down some of these laws, okay, then they will have to think of changing the constitution. Otherwise, they are fine with the existing constitution. They can work around it. That's, I mean, they don't have to necessarily have the word Hindu Rashtra in the constitution in order to be a Hindu Rashtra. They can be a Hindu Rashtra anyway.
There was a question. What was the last question on Zoom?
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, I didn't know about this. I'll just read the question. Judiciary and government has its own standoff ongoing ever since Justice Chandrachud had taken over. Does this give some hope in the judiciary? I didn't, must have been out of the loop there, but do you know anything about this, Mihir? I assume you do.
Yeah. See, what has happened is that there is a conflict going on between the Supreme Court and the union government about appointment of judges to Supreme Court and High Courts. Because right now the appointment procedure is such that the Supreme Court, it's collegium, that is, it's senior most judges decide who will be the next Supreme Court judges, etc. The executive wants the power to itself. That conflict is going on. Supreme Court is holding forth very strongly right now, saying that sorry, we are not going to allow that. Second thing is executive wants the basic structure doctrine to go, which basically what the basic structure doctrine allows is that the power of the parliament to amend the constitution are restricted. They are not unrestricted powers. They are not. That is the basic structure doctrine, and the executive wants an unrestricted power to amend the constitution. On both these points, right now the Supreme Court is holding forth very, very strongly, especially after Justice Lalit and Justice Chandrachud became the chief justices. Let's see where the battle goes, because battle lines are drawn, and we'll know in another month or so as to who blinks first. But that's the situation right now.
Can we,
You have another question?
Yeah.
can we make this the last question?
Sure. We heard from, I forget the name of the person, that making noise is one of the ways that people can contribute their voices. In that spirit, what are the names of the organization, if there are any, other than PUCL, which Mihir mentioned, in India that are actively doing work against such laws, not necessarily Hindus for Human Rights or Amnesty International, but indigenous organizations which are fighting the battle, which could get help from us in order to make it a much more internally driven change as well. Now, follow up to that.
Yeah, I will say that we have to also be careful, because we didn't talk about the FCRA, the FCRA, which is tricky in terms of funding as well. But
right. But within those constraints, but still to the extent that if it's not monetary, but if it can just be support and propagating their, even recognizing, like I don't know, even being aware and spreading awareness that such organizations exist would be helpful to them.
Yeah.
And you had a follow-up maybe.
No, just to this gentleman's question, so, and to your comment, so are there FCRA organizations that one could be potentially supporting from here in the United States?
You mean organizations that are able to comply with the FCRA? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
organizations in India that have an
Oh.
FCRA account. And
The PUCL has been affected, right, by the FCRA. So are there?
No, because PUCL doesn't take any funds
Okay.
from foreign, we don't take any foreign funds. So that's why it's not affected. But plus PUCL is not even a registered organization.
Oh. Oh.
It's a loose, collective. But there are a large number of organizations which are working around the campaign to repeal UAPA. In fact, since the trial of Bhima Koregaon cases is happening in Mumbai, 40 organizations in Mumbai came together to form what is known as Mumbai Rises to Save Democracy, and they have been campaigning a lot for removing against the misuse of UAPA. Similarly, across the country, there are a number of. Yesterday, I was in Calcutta addressing a meeting of an organization called APDR, this Association of People's Democratic Rights, which is an organization since '72. And again, similarly, across the board, a lot of democratic rights organizations, as also other organizations, have been actively voicing their protests against these arrests. That is happening.
Great. You have a comment?
Yeah, one thing that Hindus for Human Rights can help with is to provide a list of these organizations that are fighting in the grassroots in India and share it on our website. But my impression is that most of the organizations that are directly working on human rights do not have FCRA. And those that did have FCRA, like Ford Foundation, for example, have been slowly, systematically having their FCRA canceled because human rights is anathema to the government of India sees it as an interference in internal matters. So I think it'll be hard to find an FCRA organization that is directly fighting the battle in India. So what we can offer is really moral support. And the fact that we are here also listening closely, like Mr. Desai has been with us almost an hour and a half, in spite of his extremely busy schedule. And I think the kind of knowledge he has brought to us should really empower us to do more. But if I may add one more comment to one of the questions that I had about social media, the questionnaire, the person who put the question was focusing more on what's happening in social media in India. But we are here in the Silicon Valley. This is where the big culprits are in social media. So unless we here get together, whether it's Meta or Facebook, and really organize in a large way, these people are not going to listen to us because internally, there is also a lobby within some of these organizations that are heavily pro-Indian government, whether it's Google or another organization or Twitter. So my recommendation is we really need to look at very closely here in the Bay Area about how we can expand our alliances to try to create a visibility to what these organizations are doing to seriously hurt democracy and see where it goes. It's not just what's happening in India. They're simply exploiting the loopholes and others and selective treatment that some of these organizations have given to this government, like selectively deleting things that are against the government and not deleting really hate speech that directly asks for violence against people. That should be a no-no. And I think we need to educate our fellow Americans about severe damage Facebook and Meta, all these organizations are doing to Indian democracy. And that would be my point for that.
Yeah, that is regarding social media. The other thing that everyone can do here is everyone has their member of Congress. They should be talking to their member of Congress using very, don't exaggerate, don't overstate the case, but talk to your member of Congress. They will at least give you an opportunity to speak about it. and weigh in on it. Some of you may be, I don't know how they changed all the lines here, so I haven't quite gotten all of the districts.
This is Row, and then half of Fremont is in Schwaber's district.
There you go. So, so this raised the issue, just a second, raise the issue with your member of Congress. They will listen, and it may not have an impact right away. It probably won't have an impact right away, actually, but you can slowly build that. You're a constituent, and you build that in Congress, and they will eventually listen. It just takes time and effort, and you can have an impact. Yeah, you had a comment?
So thank you for bringing the topic. You just said don't exaggerate.
Can we make this the last question?
Thank you for bringing the topic. You just said do not exaggerate when you talk to your elected officials, Congress people. Do you have some kind of articulated points that we can use that and educate the Congress people? Maybe
I believe I'm looking at Hindus for Human Rights folks, and they were very excited to. I think if you talk to folks who were with Hindus for Human Rights, they probably have some material that.
Yeah, so we've been attending the town hall meeting for Rokhana, and now we have a new congressman. His name is Jimmy Pereira. So yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it doesn't matter. I mean, I think most of the people here, most of the representatives are Democrats, but don't assume just because, don't worry, political parties are relevant. It's actually just whoever your representative is.
Sure. Mayor Saab, it is a pleasure to see you, and I've heard your name a lot, and it's a pleasure to talk to you and hear your thoughts. Just a quick question. We are discussing from here in terms of what are the things which we can do from here. The gentleman was asking, sending money and stuff like that, right? But what are the top things, 3 things which you think that we can help from here, support the cause? Like, how can we, what comes to your mind when you think that, people from US can support or internationally on these things? Any thoughts on that?
That's a question to me.
Oh, that was, I think, intended for you. Yes.
Oh, okay. I don't know about 3 things, but one thing is very clear that the Indian government does look at international campaigns very seriously. And that's one kind of pressure which still works on the government. It likes to keep its, its reputation intact internationally. So the more we speak about these things, the more we talk about these things, the more we campaign around these things, and also ensure that whatever we speak about reaches the government. Okay, it becomes. I think that is one way of helping. Second way, of course, is there are a lot of people around the world who have been facing similar problems. Actually, the second and third part, I would not like to talk on Zoom. I'll talk about it at on some more secure platform. That's all I can say.
Thank you actually for joining us from India, for taking all this time and answering the bulk of the questions. I really appreciate it. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap up the Zoom part of it because we have an important cake related business here that we're gonna get into. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
And thank you to the attendees and for coming on Zoom, and we appreciate it. Oh,
yeah. Can I make a quick comment before the Zoom people leave? We are hoping very much that meetings like this with a lot of interaction can happen every month under the Desh-Videsh series. We are thinking of one on caste. We are thinking of one on Kashmir in the next couple of months. And we would very much appreciate all of you spreading the word about this forum, the hybrid forum, and also an appeal to donate whatever you can to Hindus for Human Rights so we can continue such events. Please talk to Preeti if you have in mind any contributions you can make to HFHR. So now we can end the Zoom event right now. Thank you, all of you from India as well as US and other parts of the world who joined us today. If you have any questions at all, any follow-up questions, please send them to info@hindusforhumanrights.org. We'll be happy to answer those questions or refer them to one of our panelists today or someone else. We do also want to thank Bano Jyotsna, who unfortunately was unable to join us, who would have given a personal story about Umar Khalid, who is still one of those people who is languishing in prison on the basis of a WhatsApp message coordinating a meeting. I was just thinking that I could be incarcerated here for spreading WhatsApp about us all getting together on the UAPA law. He got a very small reprieve and was released for a week to be, I think, to be at his sister's wedding, but he's back in jail. And I was hoping that we could have heard from Bano Jyotsna about, about a personal experience. Perhaps we'll do it another time. But I did want to thank her. She's the one that put us in touch with both Mr. Desai and Mr. Chaudhry. And I enjoyed every bit of what I heard today. Maybe enjoy is not the right word, with the kind of details that we need to know to fight the battle. Because when you encounter other people who have different opinion that UAPA is about terror law, hopefully this meeting has given you a few pointers in terms of how you can have a conversation that it's not the law itself that's the problem, it's the way it's being implemented. And there is no justification for Fibemia Corrigan 16, for example. On the average, they've spent over 1,000 days in prison with no possibility of bail and no trial in sight. And that is the point that you need to continue to make. Thank you all. I'll invite Sejal to come up here and tell them about the cake cutting and what we're going to do.
All right.
Hi, everyone. So as you can see, we have a very long